Hello everyone, this is Vinny Crypto from Prosum Solutions, and I'm bringing another YouTube video on another set of scripts that are available on my store called the 3Commas DCA Bot Indicator and Strategy, along with its companion, the TA Start Conditions Indicator. So these two pretty much go hand in hand, and so with this video today, I'm going to be diving into the details of these so you can better understand how they function, how they work, and how they can be useful to your performance analysis methods that you do for your bots and determining how to set up a really good bot setting. And so what we're going to be looking at is I'll give you an introduction to both of these scripts and taking a look at their settings. I'll even show you how you can get them to work together. Okay, so the TA start conditions is basically a signal provider, and the DCA bot is just a generic indicator that will receive signals from other scripts. Okay, so these two kind of go hand in hand, but they don't necessarily have to be coupled together, so you can actually use other indicators that are available in the TradingView marketplace and find open source scripts, make some small modifications, and link them together and use it as a signal provider for your 3Commas DCA bot indicator and strategy, and do some back testing and see how indeed will it function and perform. Okay, and then the last thing we'll do, we'll actually look at this particular input called the simultaneous deals per same pair. I had a customer of mine approach me about this particular input and asking me why I didn't include it into the settings of my indicator, and I wasn't even aware that it was there. So I began to study more about this, and the person and I, we basically developed an interesting way of resolving this particular input. And so I was going to demonstrate that to you in this video as well. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in to TradingView. So when you first subscribe to this script, actually, if you subscribe to the QFL 3Commas edition or the price change scalping indicator and strategy, the 3Commas edition, these two come along with it. So you'll actually get the 3Commas DCA bot indicator and strategy as well as the TA start conditions together, because I pretty much decided that if you're into 3Commas, these sets of scripts are going to be a great tool set in your arsenal to help you really better understand how your bots are going to perform by putting them on TradingView charts and looking in the history and doing your analysis, saying, okay, if I use something like this, this is how it would have performed using the history. And obviously we know that past performance is not indicative of future results, but it at least builds some confidence by evaluating how your bot settings will perform given specific unique events that can occur in certain markets. And so this will definitely be a great tool set for you to have. And so but it also is available as standalone. But anyway, so we'll go ahead and just dive right in. So when you add the strategy version to the chart, you'll obviously get the table that renders, and then the indicator will start drawing and showing you the strategy tester performance. So what you'll notice is in past, before I get into the settings, in some of the past videos, I have talked in detail about some of these videos, or some of these inputs. So I won't be diving too specifically on everything, but I want to highlight some of the uniqueness about this particular script and also demonstrate some of the features that I did not cover in those other videos. I want to elaborate on them here. So I want to use this opportunity. So if you really want a more thorough deep dive on some of these inputs, I highly suggest going to check out the Quick Fingers Luke base breaking indicator and strategy for the 3Commas edition. That one does a really good job of diving into the various settings one by one. But with this particular one, when you add this indicator to the chart, the very default starting condition is ASAP. So with ASAP, if you're familiar with it in 3Commas, it's just constantly entering into the market. And so with this particular rendition and how I modeled it within TradingView, as soon as a deal is complete, the very next bar, it'll enter in to a deal immediately. And so that's something you can expect here. And this is just related to some of the limitations of how I try to emulate 3Commas bots. It won't be very perfect. So entering into a new deal has to occur in the very next bar that concludes a deal. And so So that's the default setting when you first load it, but there is another option in here called the Trading View Custom Signal. And when you choose this particular option, it's going to activate this section right here called the TV Custom Signal section. And some of you might be familiar with this because the price change scalping script has a layout like this for helping it be filtering out entries. Well, I did lift some of those inputs and brought them over and added an additional input here. But what I'd like to do is really cover this in the later portion of the video. But essentially what I wanted to highlight is that when you choose the Trading View Custom Signal here, it will activate this section. And so the expectation is you would fill it out so that way you're providing you're linking another indicator on the chart to provide a start deal and close deal signals. Okay, so I will switch this back to ASAP. Some of the things that I want to dive deep in, so I'm not going to talk much about the strategy section or the safety orders because I've already done that, but I really wanted to look at some of the other ones where I provided some brief commentaries about them, but give you some examples of what you can expect if you actually do use them. And so with that, I've already preloaded a bunch of different tabs that are in preparation for my discussion here. And so I'll just go ahead and switch to the next tab here. And with this particular one, this one's looking at the particular input that's called the don't start deal if the daily volume is less than a specific value that you supply. I provided 10 million here. And so the way this works, if you're curious about it, so what I have here, I've got the indicator configured for the volume, and I have navigated all the way to the beginning of the time for the chart. And you'll notice here that there's no deals that it's entering, but if you look on the data window here, there's an output that I display here called the 24-hour volume, and it's actually showing you an aggregate of the volume that it's gathering so far. So keep in mind, I am in the 5-minute chart, so essentially what the indicator is doing is looking back and aggregating at least 1 day's worth of volume and then evaluating that particular input, saying, okay, am I at least this much in order to start a deal? So as I move my cursor over, you'll notice that the volume keeps increasing, right, because we're at the beginning of the chart, and so it's aggregating more and more, and then eventually it will get to the point where it will exceed that limitation and then start a deal. And so this is how you can expect to use that. So if you're ever using that and in your modeling of certain bot settings and you put it onto the chart, this is how you can at least investigate if you're wondering, okay, it entered here, why did it enter here? And then you can just use your mouse and place them over the bars and you can actually see what it gathered for the 24-hour volume from that point, and then you can better just know what it's doing. The next particular input I wanted to look at was the one that's called minimum price to open deal. So what I ended up doing here is just arbitrarily picking 0.7 as the price, and I even used a horizontal line and dropped it on the chart here so you can visually see where 0.7 is. And as you scroll to the right, you'll actually notice that the bot is not entering into a position because it is still configured on ASAP. And once the price exceeds there, so once the bar opens above that particular limit, then it will start entering into deals, and you can see how that works. Now, likewise, there is that other input that says, the maximum price to open deal. I got the same value here, so I went ahead and enabled that and have the line here on the chart, and you'll notice that it is opening deals below, and as soon as it gets above that price, it's not going to open any deals. So if you ever use these two particular inputs and you're wondering how it's going to impact performance, you can definitely emulate those here and see how that functions for you. All right, the next particular one I wanted to look at is called the cooldown between deals. So you're probably familiar in 3Commas. Let's see if I can open this up here. In 3Commas, this particular input has special units to it. Right here you can see it's got seconds. And so because this is not something I can carry over with any meaningful success, because it doesn't translate well since you're on a specific bar, or excuse me, resolution of the chart. It's not possible for me to count the number of seconds, especially when you're dealing with historical data. There's just no ability to gather what was the second by second, formation of the candle. And so I ended up redefining the unit of measure here and saying, okay, how many bars do you want to have as cooldown? And so the idea here is, if you're on a certain resolution that you're highly interested in for a particular bot configuration, like the lower the better. I mean, that's essentially how this particular input would be meaningful, right? Because it's being measured in seconds. And so you would at least want to try to convert that over as best you can on a particular resolution that will make it work. And so since it is using bars as the unit of measure here, I went ahead and configured it to 5. And the way that works there is that once a deal concludes, this particular bar is considered the first one. And then we keep counting from there, and this one will be the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and the fifth one. And now that we've reached the fifth one, the very next one is just going to go ahead and start a new deal and move on. So that's how that works. I just wanted to highlight with an example of how that functions. The next one here is called the open deal and stop. So this is useful if you're curious to essentially set the start date time on a specific value. So if you're really curious as to how the indicator would perform within the chart history, you can always fix the start date time to a specific point and then enable this particular option saying, hey, I want to open this deal and stop, just open one deal and then stop right away. And so you could enable that, and what I have here is how it went ahead and opened one deal, and as soon as it concluded, the indicator is no longer going to enter into any more deals, and you can actually look at the list of trades here and actually do some analysis and confirm whatever particular detail that you're looking for. Because sometimes when you add the indicator to a chart, it's obviously going to show all the deals that it's ever entered and exited. And so if you really want to isolate, this is an interesting feature to implement that you can emulate, just like 3Commas has there. All right. The next one here is the closed deal timeout. With this particular setting, we're basically telling 3Commas, this is the section right here called closed deal after timeout. This is where in 3Commas, you have different units that you can supply, which is like minutes, hours, and days. And so that particular unit, I was not able to really bring it over very well. And so I ended up redefining and saying, okay, how many bars do you want to have it elapse before it closes the deal forcefully? And so this is helpful if you do want to use this in your bot. At least you can emulate it on the chart and just see what would it do to your performance if you were to use something like that. And so in this particular example, this is what you could do. Here's a particular deal where it entered and it crossed safety order 1 and then eventually came right to this point. I'm going to zoom in here. And this is where it actually timed out. And so you'll notice here what the indicator does is it draws this little hourglass emoji indicating to you that I've timed out, and it went ahead and closed the position order here. So with that turned on, you can obviously see what was the impact in performance. Should I wait longer or should I wait shorter? This is the type of detail that might help you if you ever consider using something like this. At least you can model it in your bot settings within the indicator and see what it's going to do. All right, the next one here happens to be the, let's see if I can, the stop loss with the stop loss timeout. So this was an interesting one that I used. So in this particular chart, I went ahead and set the stop loss to 35, and you'll notice here that it renders this red line. So I'm actually zoomed in on a deal where this is a good example to see how this works. And so, down here, I've got the checkbox here next to the inputs that says stop loss timeout in bars. And so we went ahead and specified 5 bars. Okay, and so what you'll notice here as I zoom in closer, this is where the price action is getting over to the stop loss line, and you'll see here that if I zoom in nice and close, so as soon as the bar crosses the stop loss, it will draw this little X so that you can visually see, okay, this is where I crossed, and then it will start to add these numbers in here showing you how many bars have elapsed while the price was below the stop loss. And so in this particular one, it went 1 bar, 2 bars, and then in this third bar here, the price closed above the stop loss. Therefore, we reset the counter to 0. And likewise, in the next bar, even though it did cross the stop loss once more before it went back up and ended up closing, we ended up resetting the counter back to 0. And so obviously price action continued up higher, and then eventually it came down to revisit that stop loss again. And so here you can actually see where it did time out. So you've got the bar that crossed it with the little X and then the number 1 underneath. And over here was number 2, number 3, number 4, and it never closed back up. So when it came to the 5th one, it pretty much hit the limit. And so then we ended up closing the position on the close of that bar, and we drew the little hourglass icon there at the bottom so that you can visually see that that occurred. So this will be very helpful if you ever do consider using that setting. This will obviously be very useful for you so that you can actually determine, okay, what will this do to my bot had I started it, several months ago, using the back tester as a way for you to test how that would function and how that would actually impact the performance of your bot. Okay, and this next one here, we got the same thing, except what I ended up doing here is just I wanted to show you what it would look like if you actually chose the close deal and stop bot. So if you hit your stop loss and you timed out, at least you can now stop the bot altogether and see, especially for troubleshooting, like when you're looking at the list of trades and you want to see where it actually stopped, you can go to the list of trades and just go all the way down to the end and click on the date for the very last order, and you can zoom in real close, and you'll notice here it's the very same scenario that we saw in the previous tab, except this time you've got the long red color here for the background with the label here that says stop, and this is where the indicator stopped processing any more deals. And so that's what you can expect if you use that setting. So the next one here is the trailing take profits. So inside the settings of the indicator, I went ahead and enabled this trailing deviation. Now, this is different from how 3Commas would do it, and I had to redefine how it would work for TradingView because of a limitation that the emulator broker, which is the component that powers the strategy tester, has in terms of submitting limit orders within the same in the bar that where it's being overlapped by the prices in the bar. So because there's this limitation where it won't function if I were to submit a limit order that's within the price range of the bar, then what I ended up doing was calculating the offset relative to like the open price if it happens to be a rising bar. So what I've done here is I've got the price range tool measuring here. So I wanted to show you that settings have a 1.5% deviation, and so you could see here from the opening of this bar that triggered the trailing take profit. You can see how it's offset by 1.5%. And so this will be a little different for you in 3Commas because 3Commas is not obviously restricted by something like what TradingView has for the backtester. So as soon as the price crosses, your deviation will actually begin from the point of where it was triggered, and then if price tends to go back down and hit the 1.5%, obviously you're done with that position, right? But if it keeps going up, obviously you'll trail accordingly. But in this particular feature, this was essentially the best I could do in terms of providing a trailing feature, even though it's not perfect. But at least it gives you some information as to how your bot would behave had you turn on trailing take profit. So as you can see here, it kept trailing, and as price declined, the trailing price here would just stay the same until it started going back up, and then it would just adjust to try to keep that deviation of 1.5%. and then eventually it would close. So what I like to do here is just show you what it looks like when it does try to submit a limit order within the same bar. So here's an example of the scenario that you may encounter with TradingView. So here, this particular bar crossed the trailing take profit trigger price, and then it deviated 1.5%, and then it started following along 1.5%. Well, in this particular bar, you'll notice that the D5 exit is actually occurring right here, which was the last known price. So even though I attempted to reset it up here, TradingView ignored that and said, no, I'm not going to accept this new limit order. I'm just going to close it out here. And so that's the complication that you will see, and I can't overcome this. This is just a limitation of the emulator broker. And so just be aware that that can happen. Here, actually, here's another example where it started trailing, and the idea here, or the expectation would be to try to exit here, but you'll notice that TradingView ended up closing it at the close instead of the last known limit price, because even though it was submitted here, it tried to close it here, and so it ended up choosing the closing of the bar instead. So just be aware that this is a feature that, even though I tried to emulate it from 3Commas, it has a huge asterisk on it with a disclaimer saying, be aware that it's just not a perfect emulation of what 3Commas will actually do with your bot on the exchange. And so there's that. All right, the next one I wanted to show was the actual technical analysis starting conditions indicator. So down here at the bottom with this particular yellow line, you'll notice that this is the technical analysis start conditions indicator for 3Commas, and it's essentially going to be outputting some kind of signal so that you could see how it's signaling and influencing the bot, the DCA bot here up above. So what I'd like to do is just jump into the settings and then start describing what you can expect from them. So what I ended up doing when I started coding this is I actually studied this one page here by 3Commas called the Technical Analysis Start Conditions, and it describes all these different TA start conditions that are available if you use Binance. So you have things like RSI 7, the Ultimate Oscillator 71428, and then you've got 8 different TA presets like Bollinger Bands. You've got the Money Flow Index. You've got like the Commodity Channel Index and all the various strategy directions as well for longs and shorts and so forth. And so what I ended up doing is I emulated all of these particular features as best I could within TradingView. TradingView does have some weird limitations when it comes to UI definition, where I can't perfectly emulate the way you define it over on 3Commas. Like for example, in this particular picture, you'll see that you can choose RSI 7 on the 30-minute. So I'll go ahead and just like emulate that. And you'll notice that over here, because the conditions are operating within a long strategy, it went ahead and put the less than sign right next to the input that will carry the value or the threshold value that you define. And so in the indicator for PineScript, it's not possible to update these labels once you make a selection here, or you make a selection on the direction, right? So the idea here is if you were to choose short, then the operator would switch the other way, right? And so so that's not possible. So I ended up just putting a question mark here. I had a particular customer saying, why is there a question mark there? And so I had to explain to them, well, if you put your mouse over the strategy input, it'll actually tell you if you choose long, then the question mark is operating as a less than. But if you choose short, then it's going to use the greater than operator. So that's how you interpret that. So just be aware that these are just small nuances that kind of come with authoring indicators within TradingView. And so because they have these restrictions and not being able to provide a dynamic user interface, I just kind of have to do the best I can to try to emulate what 3Commas is able to do. So the idea is here is every time you hit the plus sign and add a new row, that would be equivalent to checking this box here and being able to choose the particular indicator and the resolution, and then supply a value for the threshold. And as you can see here, this particular indicator, I ended up emulating the two start conditions as well as the TA presets. So once you make this selection for a TA preset, you'll notice in 3Commas that it will actually change this input over here and turn it into a dropdown. And since I cannot emulate that within TradingView's indicator, this would be I ended up adding the inputs just below this one to kind of communicate to you that this particular value would look at this particular dropdown. And as you can see here, all the different options that are available for the TA presets are available here, as well as the ratings. So if you were to choose the TradingView rating, I did end up reaching out to some TradingView moderators and asking, can I use this open source script that they provided? So TradingView actually has an open source script on the ratings, and so the moderators made it clear about their house rules and how I can use it, and as long as it's not the main feature, which is not. Obviously, I'm trying to provide a solution here that's completely different than what the TradingView open source indicator is providing, and so I went ahead and brought in that source code. And I had to tweak it a little bit just to make sure it wasn't going to repaint, and so I ended up applying a lot of the best practices in terms of using the security function for the various resolutions, and as well as making small modifications to that original script to make sure it wouldn't repaint. And so once you select TradingView as the option here for the indicator type, then you obviously have the different ratings that you would normally find on the 3Commas start condition settings page. And so you get up to 7 different combinations, and every time you check one, that is considered an and coupling. So therefore, essentially, you're saying here with this particular example, you got RSI 7 and the 30-minute has to be less than 50, and the ultimate oscillator on the 30-minute has to be less than 50, and the TA preset on the 30-minute Bollinger Band has to be, passing, and the TradingView rating on the 1 hour has to be at a buy rating. And so just keep in mind that it's essentially emulating the very same way it works on 3Commas, and so you get up to 7 different combinations on that. Now, the section down here at the bottom, this is useful for you in case you really want to dive in and figure out, okay, how is this indicator grabbing the value? So you'll notice here in the data window, not only is it outputting the start condition result signal, but you'll also get the plot as well as the value. So the value is essentially allows you to put your mouse over the candles on the bar, and you can see what value it's gathered for the particular indicators you have configured, right? And they're sequenced here from TA indicator 1 all the way down to 7. And so when you uncheck one, you will just get the NA here saying not available. But when you check them, you will see some values. Now, if you want to see a visual representation of these values, you can definitely come down to this section and you could say, can you just plot it out here, because I really want to see what this looks like. So by checking these two, you'll notice that the indicator will now redraw and place the values that it obtained from that particular resolution that you configured. So you can see here, kind of covered it up, but TA indicator 1, that would be this reddish color or this dark orange color, and so that would be considered the RSI 7. So you can see the RSI 7 changing every 30 minutes, as well as the ultimate oscillator, and that one's changing every 30 minutes. So this allows you to at least dive in a little bit deeper and just kind of investigate. Like, for example, if you were looking through the chart history and you're just wondering, wow, that was weird that it would enter there. Well, at least you'll be able to not only just put your mouse over it and see why it resolved to a positive signal, but if you want to really enable it and see and compare, you can definitely do that. So that was very useful for me, especially as I was developing the script. This was very useful for me. So I ended up leaving it in there in case that would provide some value for you as well. And so with that, I'll go ahead and show you how you can now use this together with the 3Commas DCA bot and provide it a signal so that it can enter into a deal. So in this particular situation, what I'm going to do is just choose one simple signal here, just for simplicity's sake. I'm going to choose the RSI 7 on the 30-minute and it has to be less than 50. So what we'll do is I'll go ahead and open up the 3Commas DCA settings here, and I'll navigate down and I'll select the Trading View Custom Signal. And then for this particular dropdown, I'm going to select the Start Condition Result. So this is the one that's printing out 1 if it's passing and 0 if it's not passing, okay? This next input, I'm going to describe to you what this means. So there might be some indicators that you're going to want to couple with the DCA bot, and some of these indicators might be outputting a not available value on the particular bar that it's on. And so if you need it, you could check this, and what this will do is it will look at the data point and say, if it is not available, I will go back into the history and get the last known value and use that for the testing of the conditions that you define below. So not all indicators really need this, like especially for this one, it's always a 0, always a 1, so I really don't need to fix any non-available. So it's not possible that the signal is going to be not available, and so it's really not a useful feature for me to check on this one. So just be aware that some indicators might be useful for you on that, and sometimes it might not, so you have the option there to enable it or leave it disabled. All right, so for this next section, I'm going to go ahead and enable this start deal. I'm going to say I want to start this deal when this particular chart indicator data point, which happens to be that signal, is equal to the custom value of 1. And so whenever this line jumps up to number 1, I'm going to assume that that is a start deal signal. And so when I do that, you'll notice now the indicator will redraw, and you will actually see the performance of what the bot would have done in the strategy tester since it began. And so I went ahead and scrolled to the beginning of the chart history, and you can see here the indicator was already starting in a 1 position, so it ended up starting a new deal. And then eventually it just keeps going until we hit our take profit. And then you'll notice here that the signal no longer was passing anymore, so it jumped down to the 0 value. And you'll notice that the indicator is not starting a new deal, and the moment that it receives a 1, it starts a new deal, and then we move on. And so so that's how you can use the TASC indicator to couple it with the DCA bot indicator. Okay. All right, so how can you use this with other indicators? So I wanted to show you an example of how you can use scripts that you can find within TradingView. So one particular one, I had a customer approach me because he said, hey, Vinny, I really want to use this one indicator. Can you help me? And I said, sure. Which one are you interested in? And so we went over to Chris Moody's scripts page. We ended up finding the one that he was really interested in, which happened to be, see if I can find it. I know it's kind of deep here in the list. He's got so many. So where is it? Am I on the scripts page? Oops, I'm sorry. I was on the ideas. Let me click on scripts, and then I'll scroll down. Let's see. Where is it? I know it's on this third column. There it is. The Chris Moody Ultimate RSI multi-time frame. So he brought this to my attention and was like, hey, I want to get this to work. And so I looked at the source code briefly, and I was like, okay, we're going to have to end up modifying this because it's not putting out a signal that can be used with the DCA bot script. And so, and I'll talk about briefly just how this works. So let me just go ahead and switch over to a chart here I have prepared where I have Chris Moody's indicator here loaded. So the way it works is that when the RSI level is below the lower threshold, it will start drawing a green background, which is very light in color. But the moment that the RSI crosses above or crosses over the lower threshold, it'll draw this green bar here and actually output a buy signal. So it's a little hard to see, but there's a letter B here at the very bottom. So that would be considered a buy signal. And then the RSI dipped back down, and then it came back up, another buy signal, and then it dipped back down, came back up, another buy signal, and then eventually it just kept rising. It looks like it did another buy signal, and then eventually price action moved up higher, and then it generated a sell signal. Now the sell signal, the way that works is when the RSI crosses above the threshold, it'll draw this really light red background indicating to you, okay, I'm preparing to provide a sell signal. And when the RSI crosses under the upper threshold value, it will put out a sell signal. And so that's essentially how Chris Moody's Ultimate RSI multi-time frame indicator works. And so the particular customer that I had was really interested in coupling this with the DCA bot, so that way when the green bar formed, he wanted it to send the signal to the DCA bot to enter into a position. And so what we ended up doing is I ended up modifying the source code to provide that. And so what I've got here is the modified version. And so the way it would work here is the green bar now will actually output a number value greater than 1, and that would be the buy signal. So we ended up configuring, I said, okay, this is how you can do it. Go ahead and just choose Trading View, custom signal. We'll select this buy sell signal that I ended up adding to the source code. And then once you make that selection, go ahead and set our rules where we say start the deal when the indicator is greater than the custom value of 1. And so then if you want to also use it for the sell signal, we're going to go ahead and enable that close deal signal and then choose start close the deal when the indicator data point is less than the custom value of -1. So that's the way I coded it. So a 1 would be a buy signal and -1 would be a sell signal. Now this particular input here at the bottom became important because it was very important that the signal would not be accepted under specific frequency condition. And so we ended up noticing as he was trying to use it in forward testing that it was giving the signal because the RSI crossed, but because the bar had not completed, it crossed back under or whatever, and then it just kind of gave a false signal. And so the default behavior that I had at the time was as soon as the value was received as true, it went ahead and just initiated the deal. And so it was very important that it wouldn't do that. We wanted to basically confirm at the close of the bar. And so I ended up adding this input here so that you can actually decide for yourself, okay, I really want to accept it as soon as it happens, or you can just say, well, as soon as the bar is closed and the conditions are still true, then I will accept it. So just be aware that you have that for both the starting the deal as well as closing the deal. So once we made that selection, we did end up setting the take profit to be something really high because we didn't want the bot or the take profit to interfere with the closed deal signal, right? Because we wanted to essentially allow that closed deal signal some room to do its thing. And so we ended up moving this really high. So the value is really doesn't matter. We just ended up putting it really high. I chose 50. So once you do that, you can see here that the indicator is functioning and it's receiving the first buy signal and moving on. Obviously, it set up its safety order levels, and then as they're crossed, our average buy price goes down, and then eventually that very first sell signal comes in and we close it off. And so that in a nutshell, as you can see here, it just keeps doing that for every deal. Oh, one thing I should show you here is when it does get that close signal, it does put out here saying, hey, that signal provider was the one that actually closed this deal. So it wasn't anything within the configuration of the bot, but it was strictly the signal provider provided the closed deal. So you see this little emoji icon of a plug. And so, and as I continue on, you'll see that. So that solved that really well. And obviously you can do this with most indicators that you can find. But then came the idea that he had about using this new input that is found on 3Commas called the, see, I don't think I have it here, called the simultaneous deals per same pair. And so he came back to me and was like, hey, Vinny, I really want to be able to start simultaneous deals for every buy signal that I get. I want to start a new deal. And he asked me, is this something that you could do? And I was thinking it through. At first, my first impression was like, yeah, I don't think that's possible, because for me to do something like that, I'm essentially now having to keep track of multiple deals, multiple safety order levels, its own take profit. I was like thinking to myself, this is essentially like running the script all over again, except trying to maintain all these different deals simultaneously. And so I told him, I don't think that this is possible. Well, after like, I don't know, maybe a day or so, as we were just both trying to think about how to solve this, it occurred to us that maybe it would be possible if we altered the source code once more for the Chris Moody Ultimate RSI multi-time frame. And this time, when we get the first signal, the indicator will output 1.1. And once we get the second signal, it would be 1.2. And then when we get the third signal at 1.3, and so forth. So for every green buy signal we get, we just keep incrementing the 10th decimal place. And then as soon as we get the sell, we would just put negative 1.1. And if there's multiple sell signals, it would be negative 1.2, negative 1.3, and so forth, right? And so once we did that, this allowed us to do something very creative in fulfilling that requirement. So what we ended up doing is I ended up adding the indicator multiple times onto the chart, and I configured the very first one to handle the 1.1, and then the second one was 1.2, the third one was 1.3, and the fourth one is 1.4. And so I'll go ahead and show you how we did that. So in this particular indicator right here, it's already has that source code. And so I'll go ahead and choose the buy sell signal here. I'm going to head and enable it. So now we're going to say start the deal when the indicator is equal to the custom value of 1.1. So now the indicator will draw again here, and then, I have to switch this over to Trading View Custom Signal. And then it'll draw the opening of the deal here on the very first buy signal that I received. And so I'll go ahead and configure the sell as well real quick, equal to custom value of negative 1.1. And so now the indicator will respond accordingly. Let's see, I have my negative value there. There we go, negative 1.1. So that was weird. And so you can see here now it's working. So what I'll do here, I'll just turn on these other ones. I ended up assigning different colors to each one of them, so that way I can visually see which particular deal is simultaneously entering. And you'll notice now we're able to do this simultaneous deals per same pair on TradingView using the same indicator. And the idea here is for every instance you want to start, we would just keep adding that indicator and configure it the same for all, since that's how it would function in 3Commas. And then that allows you to really evaluate the performance. So one of the drawbacks to doing something like this would be that the strategy tester will only report the very strategy that's currently active. So you would have to aggregate this information together manually, either using spreadsheets or whatever you prefer. And so essentially what you would do is you would just turn off like the strategy and gather the statistics from this one, and then turn it off, gather this one, and then turn that one off, and then gather the next one, and so forth. And that allows you to evaluate, okay, is this something that's worth it for me? Like, how will my bot perform if I use something, like if I use this input? And how many do I need? Do I need 10, or do I need 3? Do I need 4? And so forth. So this will help you emulate that setting and configure the DCA bot to provide you that kind of signal. So that is, in a nutshell, the various settings of how they all function and how you can use this with indicators like TASC, as well as any other indicator you find, and alter the source code to provide you some data point that you can then bind with and be able to simulate that particular bot setting. Now, if you were to use the indicator version of the 3Commas DCA bot, the one unique difference that you will see there is you get the alert settings section here, where you can actually configure it to send the signal to 3Commas. And so you've got the JSON message for the open deal and close deal, as well as the bot ID and email token. So you can definitely do that here and create your alert accordingly. And from the previous videos that I have given on the Quick Finger Luke's 3Commas edition, I do talk about the various differences between the any alert function call, which happens to use those inputs that I showed you, and then there's also the open and close deals alert conditions. And so you can definitely use this particular. This is considered the traditional version. So the new one, this particular feature was surpassed by the any alert function call, because the advantage of using the any alert function call is you can create one single alert, and that single alert will handle both events of open and close within the indicator. So if you check open, I want to be able to send these messages through that single alert, it'll do that for you. So that's kind of nice for customers or subscribers of TradingView that have a limited number of alerts that they can create. It's good to know now that you can at least create one alert and it will handle the multiple events within that one alert. And so that's a great feature. I highly suggest using that one and not using the alert conditions anymore. And so with that, I think that pretty much concludes everything that I wanted to talk about with the 3Commas DCA indicator and strategy, as well as the TASC indicator. And so if you're interested in learning how you can obtain it, I highly recommend you visit my store. It is available as a standalone indicator, so you don't have to subscribe to the Quick Finger Luke's or the price change scalping. You could just get it as a standalone scripts for your tool set and helping you develop 3Comma bots that will perform well and with confidence. And with that, I will go ahead and conclude the video, and I look forward to seeing you in my Discord server. So hope you have a good night and take care.